Chapter 2. Describing Jezebel in History. You wouldn't believe all the different opinions about the spirit of Jezebel. There is a variety of opinions about what constitutes a Jezebel spirit, everything from a sexually loose woman to someone, man or woman, who teaches false doctrine. The Bible does not mention a Jezebel spirit, although it has plenty to say about Jezebel herself. Jezebel was found in 1st and 2nd Kings. She was the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Tyre, Sidon, and priest of the cult of Baal, a cruel, sensuous, and revolting false god whose worship involved sexual filth and lewdness. Ahab, king of Israel, married Jezebel and led the nation into Baal worship. 1 Kings 16:31. Their reign over Israel is one of the saddest chapters in the history of God's people. There are two incidents in the life of Jezebel which characterize her and may define what is meant by the Jezebel spirit. One trait is her obsessive passion for domineering and controlling others, especially in the spirit realm. When she became queen, she began a relentless campaign to rid Israel of all evidences of God's worship. She ordered the killing of all the prophets of God. 1 Kings 18:4-13. And replaced their altars with those of Baal. Her strongest enemy was Elijah, who demanded a contest on Mount Carmel between the powers of Israel's mighty one and the powers of Jezebel and the priests of Baal. 1 Kings 18. Of course, there was no contest. But despite hearing of the miraculous powers of God, Jezebel refused to repent and swore on her gods that she would pursue Elijah relentlessly and take his life. Her stubborn refusal to see and submit to the power of the living Elohim, mighty one, would lead her to a hideous end. 2 Kings 9:29-37. The second incident involves a righteous man named Naboth, who refused to sell to Ahab land adjoining the palace, rightly declaring that to sell his inheritance would be against God's command. 1 Kings 21:3, Leviticus 25:23. While Ahab sulked and fumed on his bed, Jezebel taunted him and ridiculed him for his weakness, then proceeded to have the innocent Naboth framed and stoned to death. Naboth's sons were also stoned to death, so there would be no heirs, and the land would revert to the possession of the king. Such a single-minded demonstration to have one's way, no matter who is destroyed in the process, is a characteristic of the Jezebel spirit. So infamous was Jezebel's sexual immorality and idol worship that the Master refers to her in a warning to the church at Thyatira. Revelation 2:18-29. Most likely referring to a woman in the church who influenced it the same way Jezebel influenced Israel into idolatry and sexual immorality, the Lord declares to the Thyatirans that she is not to be tolerated. Whoever this woman was, like Jezebel, she refused to repent of her immorality and her false teaching, and her fate was sealed. God cast her onto a sickbed, along with those who committed idolatry with her. The end for those who succumb to the Jezebel spirit is always death and destruction, both in the physical and the spiritual sense. Perhaps the best way to define the Jezebel spirit is to say it characterizes anyone who acts in the same manner as Jezebel did, engaging in immorality, idolatry, false teaching, and unrepentant sin. I want you to understand that it doesn't end there. Many spirits just like Jezebel have risen in this day. She was more than a person.